You know, I'm like an artist that went to art schools and did landscape painting and portrait painting and all sorts of things at a time when photography was very strong. And I did that as well. I photographed, I made movies, little Super 8 things, and I did not know what I was going to do. I was working all the time, but I was not very happy, you know, not a very happy artist. And then all of a sudden I realized I put everything on a table that I've done in a sense and looked at it and thought what is in common of all these different ways to work as an artist, as a painter, as a photographer and so on. And I realized it's this raw color. So whatever I did, this very like yellow, vibrant reds, blues, greens, this artificial color was there. No matter whether it was a sculpture or an watercolor and I thought, okay, then I start again and I only work with that. I only take colors out of their tubes, mix them in big buckets, and then I try what I can do with it. You know, and I was also at a moment where I thought I would not work in a big team. I would work alone as a painter. I wouldn't want to work as a filmmaker. I thought I can't do it. I can't use machinery. I want to be very direct and simple with what I do. So I had the raw colors, and I started from scratch, like how does that color get on the canvas? And I bought huge paintbrushes, and I just painted the color yellow on the canvas, you know. And I thought, okay, what could I do next, you know? And then I used blue and put it on half of the canvas, and then I realized that's somehow unfair to the yellow, because the yellow disappears, because the blue comes there, because there's all of a sudden hierarchy coming up. Mm-hmm. So that was all, and I started to be interested. I thought, that's interesting. I don't paint a face or a portrait. All of a sudden, I only use colors, but it asks me questions, so I have consequences. My activity has a consequence, yeah. So if I put a red on top of the blue and the yellow, something more disappears. My activity causes a consequence to the picture, or I called it picture, what I saw. So I was very busy doing that. And there was a time when I lived in Italy where I got to know a lot of wall paintings, and the relationship of wall painting and architecture became to be a very natural one to me when I lived that year in Florence. And I came back home and I thought I might expand my practice from canvas to wall and to larger things. That was my dream, you know. And I just started to paint the wall in my studio. And then I got invited with some colors, and then I got invited by somebody from Siemens, you know, to paint the place where young trainees would eat their lunch. So I started to work in, all of a sudden, not in a studio anymore, but I painted in a functional space that wasn't a studio and that wasn't a museum. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. There's some other new idea coming into my painting without me changing my painting a lot, you know. And then I was all of a sudden a little tired of being with my paintbrush stopped by the wall or by the floor. You know that from painting your houses with the paintbrush is a little tedious to work around the pipes and the windows and so on. So I thought I would be maybe more mobile with another tool, and I realized that my gaze, when I look at something, is also very mobile, very flexible, very fast. But with a paintbrush I wasn't fast, because the surface I was painting on stopped me. So I thought of the spray gun. And that's how it all started a little bit, you know, how it totally changed my way of thinking about my work. Because a spray gun with a compressor and like half a liter of, you know, a can with paint in it is really fast. And it is really also making my body much bigger, you know. A paintbrush is like this, but spraying is like going there. It's amazing. So I was expanding. I was maybe the center of the activity, but all around me was in like a minute. I did my first spray painting in the studio where I didn't know what was going to happen. I wasn't wearing a mask. I was painting a large canvas, but the whole spray dust went everywhere. So my clothes, everything I had in the studio was all covered with a lovely little dusty, it was oil paint in those days I used, so everything was greasy and oily and was actually a disaster. But then I learned more about it, and I started to use acrylics, and yeah, so that looks a little like an accident, doesn't it? And that was meant to be one, in a sense, because you were asking me about planning. In this case, for example, I had only one plan. I had done so many big shows at that year that I was starting to feel uncomfortable with the size. You know, it was very tiring, and also I thought something was going wrong. And that I was very unhappy about this big business around the work. So I kind of thought I have to delete my work. You know what I mean? I didn't know how to do it, so I was sitting in my office and I was thinking I could maybe spray my whole office. Maybe that would be better than going into other people's space and do their walls. Maybe I should do something against my own possessions or with my own possessions. So I decided then to do something more reasonable because losing the office is bad, and and also I decided to do it in a more personal way because there were very personal private thoughts, and I decided to paint my bedroom. It was amazing. It was totally uninteresting whether it was this value or that. What I found fascinating, as you said earlier on, that when you paint over the bed and the wall at the same time, all of a sudden the border between one object to the next blurs. You know, it's not this an object and that, and they are singular. I realized all of a sudden they're all one. They belong to one kind of molecule world in a sense. So I started to think, oh, that's amazing. I can actually use narrative things like money, paint, duvet, cushions, suits, like items that tell a story alongside my work, and all of a sudden something else happens. So I can't strip off the bed from the work and then the painting is there. It's not true. And I can't strip off the painting off the bed. The work is really like a fusion of these things. And that's when I started to use more personal things within my installations. So that was actually very close to the show I did in Magazine 3 in Stockholm. I think it was also 2004 where I used a bed, for example, in museum space. In this case, and that's a very good example for this, walking through something and you only see little parts. And I find that that's how I actually experience my life also. I don't think that there is a coherent picture of my life. Or when I grew up, I was brought up in a school that was teaching still canonic knowledge, you know, like the idea you have to learn Latin and read the classic literature and then you're going to be a good being. And I understand now that a society is put together of so many different informations that sometimes contradict so strongly one another that I think it is probably not, it doesn't make sense as a painter to think of a painting that has only one point of view, or thinking that art can tell you how the right way is, you know. I can only put little snippets together that are maybe not very complete. So looking at the show here, you would never see a complete idea of what I did, but you would walk through it and then gather different points of view, and in the end, as you walk through the whole thing, you would maybe have a certain feeling of what you saw.
I have never been in Japan, but I have understood that Japanese gardens are built up the same way, that you never get an overview. You go from one point to another and you get like different views all the time to get like one view and another, and all these different parts get you an idea of something. But that would also be different depending on who you are and what day you go there, of course.
Yeah, I mean, that thing we know all. If you go to a certain thing and you see, let's say with your family, a piece of theater, and 5 people will have 5 different stories to tell about that one incident. And that's how it is, I guess. So I'm very interested in this multiple perspectival experience, yeah.
And maybe is it also that we in Western are very used to central perspective as a way of learning about reality, and maybe it could be better to take it from different angles at the same time.
Well, yeah, I mean the perspectival, the central perspective implies that there is only one reality to tell. And it is also structuring the hierarchy in society very clearly. Yeah, and I wonder whether our reality is changing so fast in such short little moments, clicking new information together to a sense-making, let's say, moment, and then it changes again and again and again and again. So there is no way of an artist, I'm thinking at least, to tell this is the right way to understand and look at things. Yeah.
You know, that's very generous also. As a beholder, it's also get this feeling that I can have my own way to
Yeah,
put
but
this work together.
it requires a lot of activity from the spectator. So if the audience if you would go into a show like this, it would really require that you like to look like this at things, that you are active and walk around, and that you connect with something that is actually an open system. These systems that I generate in museums, the structures are very open. They are not like a recipe that tells you this is life, for example. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many artists that have such different ways to talk about the life. And my field in which I work as a painter is very much dealing with the area where we think without words. You know, I don't know whether you know that from your own experience, but I'm really interested in that moment, in moments in your thinking or in your a way to perceive things where you do not right away use language. So therefore, I don't use language in my practice. I don't use photographic representation. I don't use pop artistic quotes. You know, I don't quote other people's work. So, which I don't think is wrong or not a good thing to do, but it's just that my way of working does not deal with these methods. My method is a totally different one. So ambiguity, in a sense, is maybe stirred by that lack of direction that I give, of explicit direction.
Yeah, that's
but I do experience life like that. That it is very. I mean, one time one day I'm the teacher, the next time I don't know, the girlfriend, the next day I'm doing this. So I have totally different ways to live and experience and organize my life. I'm not just one person, let's say, yeah. So.
Here is still in Masmocka, where you use these huge styrofoams. But you chose here to work without painting them. What made you do that? Why?
Yeah, maybe we can go back. The space in Masmocka is really big, as you can see. It was a cardboard factory in north of New York. In the beginning of the 19th century, it was really making a lot of money. There were 5,000 people working in that factory. And then the whole area lost this economic drive. And it was one of the first places in the United States to become a museum structure. And this museum has a lot of different spaces, and this is the biggest space. And as you can see, there are these white walls with double windows, and the same here. And it's a little bit like you're looking into another building. It looks a little bit like this could also be the outside wall of another building. So it felt a little bit like a space that was maybe also outside, because it was so big. And I thought it was necessary to have these white walls with so much light coming through, somehow connected to the volume of the space. I thought if I left out these white things, that would be like a container with something in it. But I wanted to show that there's actually something traveling through it, and that thing that's traveling through might even, in my imagination, cover something in the volume. So I'm always fascinated by this thought that the image or the picture is already in the volume somehow. You have to just visualize it, like put like a spotlight on it. So these are somehow spotlit forms of light going through.
Yeah, also the relativity, of course, that this village, that when you're in it, it's of course big and it surrounds you, and you maybe live in one of the houses and everything, and then suddenly you can see it like something so small.
Yeah,
it's really strange. Yeah,
it is.
Would you say that your work is monumental?
Because it's big.
Yeah.
No, I think a monumental piece is defining the spectator as small and the piece as big, and has an authoritarian function, so as to keep you down as a subject. Yeah, I think like in a lot of the urban architecture that is used for governmental buildings tend to be monumental very often. In the 19th century, for example, very often. But still today, they want to impress, they want to represent, they want to make you be at the smaller scale. Whereas here, the scale shifts all the time.
Yeah, that's right.
So sometimes you look small in relationship to a large boulder, but you might look big in relationship to a small little thing on the floor later on. So your size shifts all the time in relationship to the work. And you always see how it's made. It's not that it is pretending to be something that it is not. You can always see that it's painted, that it's done, that it's handmade, that it's carved, that it's actually a little bit theatrical in a sense, you know.
Yes, you have the relationship to making.
To making, yeah. The construction is always very clear, I would say.
As we have been talking about scale, and it would also be interesting to talk about space, and also not only the space that you put things in, but also space, bildrum, bildraum, whatever you call it in Germany, but the space you create with the painting, like illustrate.
Yeah, I was really hoping that my work could be more in floating, you know. I was thinking a painting can be much more flexible than a sculpture. You know, I was thinking maybe paintings don't have to be like pancakes on the wall. So that is my whole search since the moment I discovered the spray gun, because the spray gun, you trigger it off and then there is all this paint flowing through, you know, through the space and landing somewhere. And actually that where it's landing, where it finds its surface, that's where the painting is visible. But I was thinking it's also there for a very short moment when I'm working. So, and then I had a show in Chicago at Renaissance Society, which is a beautiful show space up on top of the university buildings, and it has just a small elevator to get all the tools up into the exhibition space. So my longing for soil and heavy stuff wouldn't not really be fulfilled. So I was thinking, what could I do? And I was, at that moment, starting to think of balloons. I thought that's the only thing I can get up there. You know, balloons, I can inflate them up there. And there are these fantastic balloons made by an Austrian avalanche trigger-off company. So I don't know how they do it, but they have these 2-meter balloons. They inflate them and maybe trigger off some sort of snow that's too much somewhere up in the mountains. And I bought those balloons and we inflated them, and they were all colored. That was another interesting thing, though. I was pumping up color in a sense and painting on that colored stuff again, and they totally lost their appearance of balloons. You know, they looked like some sort of glass, spheric things, and you could not really tell, do they fall, do they float, do they go up? That was quite amazing. It was very fascinating.
And here a show from Berlin some years ago.
Yeah, I was then from this idea that the painting is sitting in the volume. I was thinking maybe the painted surface could be in the volume, but without mass. You know, without big structure under it, whether it's soil or made styrofoam or maybe the balloon. So we were inventing these carved ellipses that are coming from the wall and going down to the floor, and not following the 3 dimensions of the Euclidean space anymore, but some sort of gradation of coming into the space.
You have the painted surface, and you have also some illusory space there, of course, in the painting, like a room or space from the painting.
Yeah,
illusory.
I had like leftovers here, as I said here, but also here I didn't paint. So there are different grades of not painted stuff, you know. So the invisible and the visible, I think, have a very close relationship, and I was trying to work on that as well with this shadow box, it was called.
Yeah, and here you see the
back. Yeah, you could also see the back of the painting. That's what I thought was a really interesting moment, because it is actually making a little bit like a room between the wall and the work itself. So it was those colors were so strong, but once you went behind one of those, you didn't see anything but white. So you could erase the show the way that you would walk in and use the work actually. Yeah, and one went outside. So that gave me the possibility to use my work I've done for a certain space in other contexts. So I was really getting also more and more interested in being a little more efficient. Maybe have the work travel, not only do it on a wall and then have it painted over, but I thought maybe I can see what that actually what kind of effect the changing context has for the work. So this was shown then in a show in Düsseldorf outside. I was thinking of this of linking two images. One image was the church, the other image was mine. They come from totally different languages, and yeah, it was interesting to do that. And the ellipse took me to another thought, that maybe the ellipse was too regular. I was thinking maybe I do a huge little leftover of something far bigger that dropped somewhere. It happened to be the wall of a museum. But yeah, so I started to develop. That's how you see how I work. I do something and I draw my conclusions and try to solve things in the next step with different means and different intentions.
And now we have come to Vara.
The thing is, when I see these invitations, it takes a little while. So I was having it in my head, and I was then thinking maybe the house could be painted or something. I did think the first time I saw the photo, and then it took a little while, I think, until I came to see the house. And these two shades of red and caramel, they weren't on the photo that I got. So when I came here, those two test paint patches were there already, and I thought, oh wow, they're already thinking of painting the house. That's telepathic connection, but I didn't like the color so much. I thought it was like all the other houses. And then there was this thought that I thought, wow, it should maybe be something astonishing, because I understood that the community of Vara wanted a thought and had made the experience that the concert house already had brought you such an enormous difference in your life. And that was also, I was very impressed by the concert house when I came here. I had the chance of attending a concert, and I saw people coming in, having dinner, having little nibbles, enjoying the show. It was amazing, and it's not such a big community, and nevertheless you've managed to get this done. And I think everybody, when you said you wanted this house, people said you're nuts, yeah? You're never gonna get it. And then all of a sudden you have it. So I thought that's quite amazing. So there was this ability to dream I could feel here, and I thought the station is a spectacular place where you enter and leave a community, and you do it so directly here. There's the rail tracks and there's the door to the station house. So I thought maybe that is like the entry to other people's life. So it's the entry to Vara. So that has to be maybe something clearly different than any other house in the city, because the cities the houses where you live in or where you have your schools or your shops, these are other functions than the station house. And it looks a little bit like an apartment house. It does not look very like special or like a threshold. So that was the thought. And I also was aware that if I did something, it needed to be a certain size. And I couldn't make a big sculpture for the also with the money we had. So I was thinking maybe the house can contribute to the size of my work. So actually my work is quite small, but everything else is coming from Vara. So the structure, the concert house, the dream is all coming from here. And I'm just putting a little bit like 5 little things on top of the roof. And then Corinne was saying that there is the tile factory close in Lidköping. So that was super. They could provide the tiles. So that problem was solved, and because I think that's beautiful, these blue tiles. And then there was a little moment where the whole project was lying on ice in a sense.
Yes.
Yeah. And then we changed the color because we thought it was going to be pink, like a very hot fluorescent pink. And then we discovered that the pink can't be made in those materials. And then the blue was the better solution, because they could make a beautiful blue in the tile factory and in the porcelain factory. And I like the blue also for its connection with the sky. So all of a sudden the pink would more connect to the red house tradition you have here, whereas the blue is connecting to a space that is not material, that is ephemeric, and also the blue. You have this function in filmmaking that you use the blue box, you know, maybe you've heard of it. It's like people acting for a film and there is blue behind them, and you can Photoshop everything into that blue zone. So it's like the blue zone where you can actually project everything you think of onto it. And I really like this with this house. Yeah, there is a lot of change happening. That is due to the fact every time that you do something outside. So I think some sort of, call it art piece or whatever you want to call it, that is outside, that is not in a museum, in a sheltered place, is going through a lot of different situations. The daylight changes, the weather changes, the people are also passing by that are not maybe wanting to see it. There is a lot of maybe different opinions about it, more than in a museum, because people that go into a museum, they tend to love to go to museums and make a decision beforehand whether they're interested. Whereas here you don't really make that decision. You're confronted with something, or my work is confronted with people that are not very happy about it, possibly, you know. So I think there's a lot of changes, different conditions for an art piece or something like that in public space. I mean, I'm a painter. I'm in the imagination business, you know. That's where I'm an expert, and I really deal a lot with the surface. And the surface is one thing, and what is inside, or maybe there is no inside, we don't know. But that's another thing. And these two things can cohere and cannot cohere at all. So if you have an orange and you paint it blue, do you still have orange feelings towards that blue orange? I don't know. You know, you might not have. You could try at home. Maybe you have some house paint and paint an orange black. What do you think about that orange? How do you read that orange then? Even though you know it's an orange, it looks like orange peel, you've painted it yourself. Are you able to read it as orange? And I think that is so interesting that you have, or you dress something that you never wear, and all of a sudden people treat you different ways. So I think that is a little bit what that house deals with. It has a function, yes, it is a station house, and there is a fantastic little ice cream shop in there. And at the same time, it does something that does not look very functional, you know. So what is now the reality? Is that it's a station house, the most important reality, or is it that it's blue and has funny looking things on top that might slide down? Or is it the guy with the skateboard in front? What is the most important thing in our life? Where do we choose where the reality lies? And I think that it is so multiple public space. It has no clear, it has to be like this or has to be like that way. But I think we treat it very often like this, and therefore lives get somehow streamlined, and I don't think that's very necessary. So, yeah. That's why I took this title. And also we had to change the color, and we had to change the project the whole time, and it had like a 3-year process, so Blue Orange talks about that as well.